unlimited drama series.
Nothing says forever, like a $6,000 ring and 80 people waiting to see you fail. The engagement party was Elena's idea, naturally. She wanted the whole town to witness our perfect love story. Her words, not mine. I should have known something was wrong when she insisted on inviting people we barely talked to anymore. "David, you look miserable," my sister-in-law Janet whispered, sliding up beside me with her third glass of champagne. "This is supposed to be your celebration." I forced a smile and adjusted my tie. The community center felt stuffy, decorated with white balloons and roses that probably cost more than most people's rent. Elena floated through the crowd in her designer dress, accepting congratulations like she was running for office, which, knowing Elena, she probably was in her head. "Just taking it all in," I told Janet, watching my fiancé laugh at something Trent Morrison said. Trent owned the luxury car dealership downtown and had recently become one of Elena's clients. He also had the kind of smile that made you want to check your wallet afterward. The scrap metal business I'd built from nothing didn't exactly scream high society, but it paid the bills and then some. Elena used to appreciate that. Used to appreciate a lot of things about me, actually. These days, she seemed more interested in impressing people who wouldn't spit on me if I was on fire. "Elena's really glowing tonight," Janet continued, though something in her tone suggested she wasn't entirely complimentary. "That dress must have cost a fortune." "Everything costs a fortune these days," I muttered, taking a long sip of my drink. The whiskey burned, but not as much as watching Elena hang on every word that came out of Trent's mouth. My daughter Maya bounced over, her college freshman energy radiating like heat from a furnace. "Dad, Mom wants everyone to gather around for the toast. She's got something special planned." Of course she did. Elena always had something special planned. Usually involved making me look like the lucky guy who somehow convinced a goddess to settle for a mere mortal. The crowd formed a loose circle around us. Elena's parents beamed from the front row. They'd never quite forgiven me for not being a lawyer or doctor, but the engagement ring had apparently bought me some temporary goodwill. Elena's best friend Jessica stood nearby, holding her phone up to record everything, because nothing happened in Elena's world unless it was documented for social media. "Thank you all for coming," Elena began, her voice carrying that practiced courtroom confidence. "David and I are so grateful to have you here to celebrate this milestone with us." She paused, looking directly at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. The champagne had brought a flush to her cheeks, and her eyes seemed brighter than usual. Too bright, maybe. "You know, everyone always asks how you know when you found the one," she continued, gesturing with her glass. "And I used to think it was about compatibility or shared goals or building a life together." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. I felt my jaw tighten slightly. Something about her tone was setting off alarm bells in my head. But tonight, looking at this beautiful ring, surrounded by all these wonderful people, I realized the truth. Elena's voice grew louder, more confident. "I only said yes because the ring was beautiful. I never actually wanted to marry you, David." The room went silent. Not the good kind of silent you get during a touching moment. The kind of silent you get right before a car crash, when everyone realizes what's about to happen, but nobody can stop it. Elena blinked, as if suddenly realizing what she'd just said. Her hand flew to her mouth, but the words were already out there, hanging in the air like smoke from a house fire. I didn't mean," she started, but I was already moving. I walked calmly to where she stood, took her left hand gently in mine, and slid the engagement ring off her finger. The diamond caught the light from the overhead fixtures, throwing tiny rainbows across the wall. "Well then," I said loud enough for everyone to hear, "I guess we won't be needing this anymore." I pocketed the ring and walked toward the exit. Behind me, the silence erupted into chaos. Gasps, whispered conversations, someone's nervous laughter. I didn't turn around to see Elena's face. I didn't need to, I could imagine it perfectly. The cool night air hit me like a slap as I stepped outside. My hands were shaking, but not from the cold. 23 years of marriage, 2 years of engagement planning, and it all came down to a drunken confession at a party neither of us really wanted. I sat in my truck for a long time. watching people stream out of the community center. Some looked embarrassed, others excited. Nothing like a public relationship meltdown to give the gossips something to chew on for months. Elena emerged eventually, supported by Jessica, and looking like she wanted to disappear into the pavement. She spotted my truck and started walking over, but I was already pulling out of the parking lot. In my rearview mirror, I saw her standing under the streetlight, still in that expensive dress, looking smaller than I'd seen her in years. The house felt different when I got home. Same furniture, same pictures on the walls, same creaky floorboard by the kitchen sink. But something fundamental had shifted. Maybe it was me. I poured another whiskey and sat at the kitchen table, turning the engagement ring over in my fingers. $6,000 for a piece of jewelry she only wanted because it was pretty. Not because it represented our future or our love or any of the things I thought it meant when I bought it. My phone buzzed with text messages. Elena probably trying to explain or apologize or pretend it never happened. I turned it off without reading them. Tomorrow would bring consequences, explanations, and all the messy business of untangling a life we'd built together. Tonight, I just wanted to sit in the quiet and figure out who I was going to be now. The whiskey was smooth, the house was silent, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could think clearly. Elena had given me something valuable tonight, even if she didn't realize it. She'd given me the truth, and the truth, as they say, will set you free. I just hadn't expected freedom to taste quite so bitter. The next morning arrived with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Elena's car was gone from the driveway. Probably spent the night at Jessica's, licking her wounds and planning damage control. I'd slept surprisingly well for a man whose engagement had imploded in front of half the town. Coffee in hand, I started making phone calls. First to the bank, where I discovered that being unmarried had certain advantages when it came to joint accounts. Amazing how quickly you can freeze assets when you're the primary account holder and your fiancé just publicly announced she never wanted to marry you. I'd like to make some changes to my accounts, I told the customer service representative, a pleasant woman named Carol who probably dealt with relationship disasters every day. Of course, Mr. Patterson. What kind of changes are we looking at? The kind where only my name is on everything. Carol didn't ask questions. Bless her professional heart. Next came the house. Elena had moved in 3 years ago, but the deed was still solely in my name. Something she'd nagged me about changing, but I'd kept putting off. Procrastination, it turned out, had its benefits. I called a locksmith. How soon can you get here? I asked. Couple hours, if it's urgent. It's urgent. While I waited, I did something I'd never thought I'd do. I started digging through Elena's digital life. Her laptop was still on the kitchen counter, password protected, but not particularly well. Elena had always been predictable with passwords, birthdays, anniversaries, pet names. It took me 3 tries to get in. Maya 2004. Our daughter's name and birth year. Classy. What I found in her email and text messages made my morning coffee taste like ash. Months of correspondence with Trent Morrison, starting professional and gradually becoming less so. Hotel reservations, dinner plans when she'd told me she was working late. Photos I definitely wasn't supposed to see. The Lakeside Motor Inn. The same place I'd taken Elena when we were teenagers, back when it was just a cheap motel for kids who couldn't afford anything better. Now, it was apparently where she went to remember what excitement felt like. I printed everything. Call it evidence, call it insurance, call it the kind of documentation that comes in handy when your world falls apart. Public. The printer churned out page after page of betrayal, each sheet another nail in the coffin of whatever we'd once had. The locksmith arrived around noon, a gruff guy named Pete, who didn't ask why I was changing the locks on my own house. He just did the work and handed me the new keys. You want me to leave the old lock somewhere in case he started? No, I said firmly. I don't. Elena's parents called around 2. Her mother, Patricia, had that tone people use when they're trying very hard to be reasonable while actually being furious. David, honey, Elena is beside herself. She says she can't get into the house. That's correct. Well, surely you can work this out like adults. She made a mistake, but... Patricia, did you hear what she said last night? In front of everyone? A pause. She'd been drinking. People say things they don't mean when they've been drinking. Sometimes they say things they do mean, but are usually smart enough to keep to themselves. Another pause, longer this time. Now, where's she supposed to get her things? I'll have them packed and ready by tomorrow. She can pick them up when I'm not here. David, you're being unreasonable. Am I? Because from where I'm sitting, I'm being remarkably reasonable. I could have made a much bigger scene last night. I hung up before she could respond. Family loyalty was a beautiful thing, but it had its limits. Maya called an hour later, her voice tight with the kind of anger only a 20-year-old can muster. Dad, what the hell? Mom's crying, Grandma's furious, and everyone's talking about last night like it was some kind of soap opera. Your mother said what she said, Maya. I didn't force those words out of her mouth. She was drunk. People make mistakes. 23 years of mistakes, apparently. That's not fair. Fair, I laughed, but there wasn't much humor in it. Let me tell you what's not fair. Fair isn't finding out your fiancé has been having an affair. Fair isn't discovering that the woman you thought you'd spend the rest of your life with only said yes to your proposal because she liked the jewelry. Fair isn't being humiliated in front of your friends and family because someone couldn't keep their mouth shut after a few drinks. Maya was quiet for a moment. You went through her stuff, didn't you? Smart kid. Too smart, maybe. I went through the laptop she left in my kitchen, yes. That's a violation of privacy. So is adultery, but here we are. She hung up on me. I wasn't surprised. Maya had always been closer to Elna, always seen her mother as the successful one, the ambitious one, the one worth admiring. I was just the guy who paid for college and fixed things when they broke. Evening brought Elena herself, standing on the front porch, looking like she hadn't slept. She tried her key first, of course, then knocked when it didn't work. I opened the door, but didn't invite her in. We need to talk, she said. I think you said everything that needed saying last night. David, please. I was drunk, I was nervous, I said something stupid. You know I didn't mean it. Do I? Because I've spent the day going through your emails, Elena. Your text messages, your hotel receipts. Her face went pale. You had no right. I had every right. You left your laptop in my kitchen, in my house. The house you apparently won't be living in anymore. You can't just throw me out. I have rights. You have the right to find somewhere else to live, preferably with someone who appreciates beautiful rings and doesn't mind being second choice. I closed the door and turned the new lock. She pounded on it for a few minutes, shouting things I chose not to listen to. Eventually, she gave up and left. I spent the evening packing her belongings into boxes, clothes, books, the expensive skincare products she ordered online, the framed photos of us that now seemed like evidence from someone else's life. It was methodical work, almost therapeutic. By midnight, Elena's presence had been reduced to a dozen cardboard boxes stacked in the garage. 23 years of shared life, condensed and ready for pickup. I poured a final whiskey and sat on the couch, looking around the living room. It felt bigger somehow, like removing Elena's things had given the space room to breathe. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, lawyers probably, and definitely more family drama. Maya would likely side with her mother, and Elena's parents would close ranks. But tonight, for the first time in months, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. My phone buzzed with another text from Elena. I glanced at it long enough to see the words mistake and talk and please, then deleted it without reading the rest. Some conversations were over before they started. 3 days passed before I drove to the Lakeside Motor Inn. I told myself it was just curiosity, but that was a lie. I wanted to see the place where my engagement had really ended, long before Elena's public confession made it official. The motel sat on the edge of town like a relic from a different era. It had been renovated since Elena and I were teenagers. New paint, updated signs, probably better cable TV. But it still had that slightly seedy charm that made it perfect for people who didn't want to be seen. I parked across the street and watched the comings and goings. Mostly traveling salesmen and the occasional couple looking for privacy. The kind of place where you paid cash and nobody asked questions. Trent's Mercedes was parked in front of room 12. I sat there for an hour, engine running, heat on, watching the door to that room like it might spontaneously combust. Around 2 in the afternoon,
He texted at 2 a.m. Leave the door unlocked. You left our door unlocked for him?
What? It was Watch more on Grammarly.com.
Elena emerged first, looking around carefully before walking to her car. Trent followed 5 minutes later, straightening his tie and checking his phone. They left separately, like they'd practiced the routine. I waited until both cars were out of sight, then walked across the street to the motel office. The desk clerk was a thin woman with tired eyes and the kind of smile that suggested she'd seen everything at least twice. Help you? I'm looking for information about one of your guests, Trent Morrison. Her smile faded slightly. We don't give out information about guests. I pulled out my wallet and placed a $50 bill on the counter. I'm not asking for his room number. I already know it's 12. I'm asking how long he's been renting it. She looked at the money, then at me, then at the money again. You're not a cop. No, I'm the guy whose fiancé has been meeting him here. Understanding dawned in her eyes. She palmed the 50 with practiced ease. 3 months, every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon. Pays for the week, uses it twice. Same room every time? His request. Said he liked the view. I looked toward room 12. The view was of the parking lot and a dumpster. Thanks. For what it's worth, she called as I turned to leave. She never looked happy when she left. Small comfort, but I'd take it. That evening, I drove to Trent's dealership. Morrison Luxury Motors occupied a prime spot on Main Street. All glass and chrome, and vehicles that cost more than most people's houses. Trent's personal Mercedes, a different one from the motel car, sat in the owner's spot near the front entrance. I parked in the shadows behind the service department and waited. Trent emerged around 7, checking his phone and walking with the kind of swagger that suggested he thought the world owed him something. He climbed into his Mercedes and drove off, probably heading home to his own unsuspecting spouse. I waited another hour to make sure he wasn't coming back, then got to work. The tire iron for my truck made short work of his front tires. Not slashed. That would be too obvious, too criminal. Just deflated, with the valve stems loosened enough that they'd stay flat, but could theoretically be fixed. The kind of thing that could happen naturally if you were unlucky. I keyed a single word into the paint on his driver's side door. Liar. Then I drove home and printed out the most damaging of Elena's text messages. The ones where she complained about me, where she talked about how much more exciting Trent was, where she made plans for a future that didn't include her current life. I mailed copies to her parents. The next morning brought the first real consequences. Elena called screaming before I'd finished my first cup of coffee. You mailed my private messages to my parents? Are you insane? I mailed the truth to people who were calling me unreasonable. Seemed fair. Fair? You violated my privacy, Elena, you lost the right to privacy when you started conducting your affair on devices connected to accounts I pay for, in a house I own, while wearing an engagement ring I bought. You're being vindictive. I'm being honest. There's a difference. My mother is devastated. Your mother called me unreasonable for changing the locks on my own house. Now she knows why I changed them. Elna was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller, more vulnerable. David, we can fix this. We can go to counseling. Can we fix 3 months of Tuesday and Thursday afternoons at the Lakeside Motor Inn? Can we fix you telling a room full of people that you only said yes to my proposal because you liked the ring? Another pause. How did you know about the motel? I know lots of things now, Elena. That's what happens when someone starts paying attention. You followed me. I followed the evidence. You and Trent weren't exactly careful about covering your tracks. She hung up on me. I finished my coffee and got ready for work, feeling lighter than I had in months. Around noon, Jessica called. Elena's best friend had always been polite to me, but never warm. I was just the husband, not particularly interesting or important. Today, she sounded nervous. David, Elena's really struggling with all this. Maybe you could ease up a little. Ease up on what exactly? The retaliation, the locks, the bank accounts, sending those messages to her parents. Jessica, did you know about the affair? A pause that told me everything I needed to know. I thought so, I continued. So, when you talk about me easing up, what you're really saying is that I should make it easier for Elena to continue lying to everyone about why our engagement ended. She made a mistake. She made a choice. Multiple choices, actually, over the course of several months. I'm just making sure people understand what those choices were. You're trying to destroy her. I'm trying to protect myself. There's a difference. That afternoon, I drove past Trent's dealership. His Mercedes was still in the parking lot, surrounded by a small crowd of onlookers. Someone had called a tow truck to take it to a body shop. Trent himself stood nearby, gesticulating angrily at a police officer who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. I kept driving, but I was smiling. Maya called that evening, her voice cold and distant. Grandma Patricia showed me the messages you sent. Good. Then you know the truth about why your mother and I aren't getting married. I know you're being cruel and vindictive. Maya, your mother has been lying to you, to all of us, for months. So you decided to humiliate her publicly? I decided to stop protecting her from the consequences of her choices. She's my mother. And she's the woman who was planning to marry me while having an affair with another man. Both things can be true. Maya hung up without saying goodbye. I wasn't surprised. Elena had always been the fun parent, the one who took Maya shopping and supported her dreams of changing the world. I was just the guy who enforced curfews and worried about college tuition, but Maya was 20 years old now, old enough to understand that the world was more complicated than she'd been taught. She'd figure it out eventually, or she wouldn't, and I'd lose a daughter along with a fiancé. Either way, I was done pretending that protecting other people's feelings was more important than protecting myself. The house felt peaceful that night, quiet in a way it hadn't been in years. I made dinner for one, watched whatever I wanted on television, and went to bed without having to negotiate or compromise or pretend to be interested in someone else's day. For the first time since the engagement party, I slept through the night without waking up angry. Elena's counterattack came through Maya's social media accounts. I discovered this when old Pete, my most reliable employee, showed up to work with a concerned expression and his phone in his hand. Boss, you might want to see this, he said, holding up the screen. Maya had posted a long, emotional rant on every platform she could find, painting me as a controlling, vindictive man who couldn't handle his fiancé's success. According to her version of events, I'd manipulated Elena into drinking too much at the engagement party, then used her momentary lapse in judgment to justify destroying her life. The post had been shared dozens of times already, with comments ranging from supportive to vicious. Several people I'd considered friends had liked it. Elena's fingerprints were all over the language. Too sophisticated for Maya, too calculated for genuine emotion. Kids these days, Pete muttered. No respect for their elders. It's fine, Pete. Let people think what they want. But it wasn't fine, and we both knew it. In a town this size, reputation mattered. The scrap metal business depended on relationships built over years, and those relationships could evaporate overnight if enough people decided you were the villain. I spent the morning calling customers, making sure they knew the real story before Maya's version became the accepted truth. Most were understanding. Divorce and relationship drama were nothing new in a place where everyone knew everyone else's business. But a few seemed cooler than usual, more formal. Around lunch, I drove to Elena's new apartment. She'd rented a place downtown, one of those modern units with floor-to-ceiling windows, and rent that probably cost more than my mortgage. Her car was in the parking garage, so I knew she was home. She answered the door in yoga pants and an old college sweatshirt, looking like she'd been crying recently. The sophisticated lawyer persona had been replaced by something smaller and more vulnerable. David, what are you doing here? We need to talk about Maya's social media campaign. Elena's face flushed slightly. I don't know what you mean. Sure you do. The post about me being controlling and vindictive? The one that sounds exactly like something you'd write for a closing argument? She stepped aside reluctantly, letting me into the apartment. It was sparsely furnished, a couch, a coffee table, a television mounted on the wall. Boxes were still stacked in the corners, like she hadn't decided whether this was temporary or permanent. Maya's upset, Elena said. She has a right to express her feelings. She has a right to express her own feelings, not yours. That post was your words coming out of her mouth. You're paranoid. Am I? Because it's interesting how Maya suddenly knows details about our relationship that I never told her. Details that only you would know. Elena sat on the couch, pulling her knees up to her chest. You're destroying my reputation, David. My career, my relationships with my family. Maya's just trying to defend me. Your reputation destroyed itself the moment you decided to have an affair. I'm just making sure people know the truth instead of whatever story you're spinning. The truth? Elena's voice rose slightly. The truth is that we've been growing apart for years. The truth is that you stopped trying to make me happy a long time ago. The truth is that Trent makes me feel alive in a way you haven't in ages. Then why didn't you just leave? Why the engagement, the party, the whole charade? She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands, because leaving would have meant admitting failure. And I don't fail at things. There it was. The real truth, finally. Elena couldn't bear the thought of being seen as someone whose relationship didn't work out. So she decided to have it both ways. The security of our life together and the excitement of something new. Well, congratulations, I said. Now you get to fail publicly instead of privately. You're enjoying this. I'm surviving this. There's a difference. I stood to leave, but Elena's voice stopped me at the door. David, wait. What if we could find a way to work this out? Quietly, without all the drama? I turned back to her. What exactly are you proposing? We call off the engagement officially. Mutual decision, no fault, just two people who realized they wanted different things. I'll talk to Maya, get her to take down the posts. We divide our assets fairly and go our separate ways. And Trent? Elena looked away. That's over. It was a mistake, a midlife crisis or whatever you want to call it. He's not worth losing everything for. Interesting. What changed your mind about him? Someone vandalized his car, keyed it, flattened the tires. He's convinced it was you, and he's been calling me nonstop, demanding I make you stop. I kept my expression neutral. And what did you tell him? I told him I'd talk to you. Consider this the conversation. I didn't vandalize his car. David, Elena, I didn't vandalize his car. I have no idea who did that. It was technically true. I hadn't vandalized it. I'd deflated the tires and keyed one word into the paint. Completely different thing. He doesn't believe that. Then he should call the police and file a report. I'm sure they'll investigate thoroughly. Elena studied my face, looking for some sign of guilt or admission. She wouldn't find it. 23 years of marriage had taught me how to keep my thoughts to myself when necessary. So, what's your answer? She asked finally. Can we end this quietly? The engagement is already over, Elena. You ended it at the party. As for the rest, I shrugged. Actions have consequences. You chose to have an affair. You chose to humiliate me publicly. And you chose to use our daughter as a weapon against me. Those choices have results. What do you want from me? I want you to leave me alone. Stop calling, stop texting, stop having Maya post things online. Find somewhere else to live your life and let me live mine. And if I do that, you'll stop whatever it is you're doing. I'll stop responding to attacks. But Elena, if you keep coming after me, through Maya, through social media, through whatever other schemes you cook up, I'll keep defending myself, and I've gotten pretty good at it lately. I left her sitting on the couch, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. The elevator ride down felt like descending from a great height, leaving behind something that had once seemed important, but now just looked tiny from a distance. That evening, Maya's posts disappeared from social media. All of them, as if they'd never existed. She called an hour later, her voice tight with embarrassment. Mom said I should apologize. Your mother was right. I was angry and hurt, And I wanted people to know that you weren't perfect either. Maya, I never claimed to be perfect. But there's a difference between being imperfect and being dishonest. I know that now. Mom told me about Trent, about the affair. I'm sorry you had to find out that way. Are you really not going to try to work things out? Some things can't be worked out, sweetheart. Some things just have to end. Maya was quiet for a moment. I love you both, you know. This is just, it's hard. I know it is. And I love you too. That's never going to change, no matter what happens between your mother and me. After we hung up, I sat in the kitchen with a glass of whiskey, feeling like I'd won a battle I'd never wanted to fight. Elena had backed down, at least for now. Maya had apologized. Trent was dealing with his own problems. But I had a feeling this was just